So welcome to tonight's class. I think we're up to 15, our 15th session in this course. And we'll get started as we usually do with just reciting some prayers. So let me get those on the screen and we'll go from there. So again, even though this says 3 times to recite this praise to Shakyamuni Buddha, we're only going to do this once tonight. And just think about, again, all the qualities of the Buddha that we are exploring in this course really is how we accomplish that ourselves through our having Buddha nature. So just kind of have some confidence that you can become just like the Buddha through all these amazing qualities that the Buddha has developed, you too can have. To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. Let's do the short mandala offering and visualizing the entire universe transformed into a beautiful kind of pure land, a Buddha field that represents the enlightened state that we and others can achieve. And we're making that vast pure offering so we can receive the blessings of the Buddhas, the Gurus, so we can become just like them. This ground, anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, 4 continents, the sun and the moon, I imagine this as a Buddha field and offer it. May all living beings enjoy this pure land. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. Then refuge in bodhicitta, bringing these 2 thoughts to mind as we recite these words, the first time in English and then the other 2 times in the Tibetan. I go for refuge until I am enlightened, to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. Sangye chodang soki choknam la jangchu bardu dakni kyapsu chi daki chanyen gipe sonam gi dola penchir sangye duparsho. Sangye chodang soki choknam la Jangchu bardu dakni kyabsu chi daki chanyan gipe sanam gi dola penchir sangye duparsho. Right, let's do a short meditation. The first few minutes, we'll just focus on the breath in order to calm the mind a bit. So I think you can all do that in whatever way you prefer to work with the breath. Then I'll come in a few minutes after the silent meditation and lead you in a short reflection to set our motivation for tonight's class. So I'll ring the bell to begin. So now let's set our motivation together. And to do this, we're going to reflect briefly on this 10th presentation we looked at last week. We're going to continue that one at the beginning of tonight. It's a presentation on indivisibility. And recall that this presentation was to help us to understand that when we attain Buddhahood, when our Buddha nature has transformed completely into that state of full enlightenment, the qualities that we will possess at that time are indivisible, meaning that you can't have one without the other. They're all part and parcel of being a Buddha. And to reflect on this, we're going to use the one way that these were kind of condensed, all these various qualities that we can talk about that a Buddha possesses can basically be summed up into two main ideas. One is the qualities of insight or realization, and the other pertains to abandonment, kind of having ceased and let go of all of the things that obscure the mind. So when we recited the refuge verse just a few minutes ago, we started with that wonderful word that means Buddha, Sangha, this Tibetan word that encapsulates these two ideas. The first word, Sang, meaning that we have completely purified the mind, gotten rid of all of these adventitious defilements, all of the obscurations to our own liberation, the afflictive obscurations, as well as everything that obstructs our attainment of Buddhahood, omniscience. These are the knowledge obstructions or obscurations. So this is one aspect of the fully enlightened state, is to have removed all the impurities in our own minds. It's kind of the fulfillment of our own welfare, a state of freedom that we've never known. Then there's the other part of the word for Buddha, Gye. And Gye means to fully develop. All the insight and realizations have been brought to their greatest level. Again, there's nothing more that we can learn or acquire. We have full qualities of being able to know the true nature of all things that exist, while also knowing their conventional nature. The two truths, having that simultaneous, direct awareness of everything that exists, conventional truths as well as ultimate truths. And this allows us to then know the minds of other beings, to know their predispositions, to know their karma, and then to be able to help them through the force of our compassion for them. So this is what we're aiming for when we set our motivation of bodhicitta, to actualize these two in our minds, to develop all the qualities that are indivisible. We can identify them through conceptuality, but they are within the entirety of becoming a Buddha. This is what we're aspiring to achieve, that state where with our minds completely purified and with our qualities fully developed, we then can work spontaneously, effortlessly, and without any end to help sentient beings to achieve that same state. So bring that motivation to tonight's teaching so that everything that we do becomes a cause for that result. Hey, again, welcome everyone. And we're working our way just at the tail end of these 10 presentations. Again, in this text, the 10 presentations are set out primarily to give us the assurance of this one fact. These two facts kind of go hand in hand. The first fact is that the mind is clear light, that it has no inherent existence, it has no kind of stains of that whatsoever. And then based on that, of course, we can see the accompanying thought that we're going to get into tonight when we look at what are called the 9 similes. And this is where we can understand that everything that currently pollutes our minds, all those obscurations and so on that I mentioned in the meditation, all of that can be removed because it's there adventitiously. It's not there in the nature of the mind. So let me go back to just review a little bit, since we're at the tail end of this presentation on the um, topic of indivisibility. I'm not going to go back to the chart on that for now, but recall that in verse 185, we had four things that were being set out that were also sort of combined together, that are indivisible. That very first line, the Dharmakaya, the Tathagata, the Arya's ultimate truth, and non-abiding nirvana. These describe different aspects of that fully enlightened state. The state of a non-abiding nirvana, not abiding in the peace of a solitary kind of pursuit, and also not abiding in samsara any longer. So again, recall that Dharmakaya is referring to the natural purity of the nature truth body. The nature truth body, again, is the emptiness of the Buddha's mind, together with the complete abandonment, cessation of all of the obscurations, all the adventitious defilements. The Tathagata in this context represents the wisdom truth body. That's kind of the enlightened mind of the Buddha that is together with that nature truth body, together with that emptiness. And here specifically focusing on the wisdom truth body that knows emptiness, that understands emptiness fully, that ultimate truth. Of course, the Dharmakaya, the wisdom, or the wisdom truth body of the Buddha, that also understands conventional phenomena. But Tathagata here is shorthand primarily for that wisdom mind that knows the ultimate truth of all phenomena. And the third one, the Arya's ultimate truth, is the complete adventitious purity of the nature truth body. So the natural purity was the Dharmakaya. The adventitious purity is being split out here in this presentation to be called the Arya's ultimate truth, which essentially is referring to the fact that the Buddha, the Buddha has attained a complete purity of the mind, removed all the adventitious defilements. And then non-abiding nirvana itself is the achievement of having done that work, having abandoned everything that is to be abandoned. So, and this was just introduced. These are the main four qualities that are being talked about here, and it uses the analogy of them being indivisible, just like the sun and the rays of the sun. You can kind of think about them differently, but they're part and parcel of the whole phenomenon of a shining sun and so on. And we're going to see this analogy repeated tonight in the final few verses of this topic. We go forward a little bit just to mention again that these are kind of being seen as sort of synonyms according to verse 86. That this is kind of, again, the indivisibility kind of carries over in terms of various qualities. I do want to, no, this one I don't need to necessarily go into. Let me get the one verse that had to do with this idea of here in verse 189. It says here, liberation is inseparable in its character from all aspects, the innumerable, the inconceivable, and the quality of being without defilement. Whatever is this liberation is also the Tathagata. So remember that when we went through this last time, there are four things mentioned here. They don't line up, correspond to the four I just went through, but these four speak to kind of condensing all the qualities of a Buddha. So all aspects and the innumerable, remember that those essentially referred to kind of the understanding of the vast, the ability to know conventional truths, because there are all aspects, all the various things that exist, which are innumerable, which are, so huge that it's very hard for us to even get our heads around what that must be like to know all of those conventional phenomena. The third one, inconceivable, represents the wisdom that is knowing the profound, the deep, emptiness, knowing the ultimate truth in regard to everything that exists. And then the final one, without defilement, is referring to the abandonment. So once more, if we go back to the meditation I just led, Sang is essentially the last of those, being without defilement, no longer having anything to purify in the mind. And then Ye is the full development of our knowledge of all aspects which are innumerable in the conventional awareness of things, and then the inconceivable, the emptiness of all those phenomena that exist as conventional truths. So these are coming up again. That's why I'm kind of pointing them out as we kind of enter into the final bit of this section. So what I would like to do, let me get it queued up to be able to do that. I think we're on page 167. Yeah, I'm going to go forward. Just there it is, right there, exactly. But before we do this, I'm going to go ahead and share some slides from Geshe Loden's book. Recall that last week I had prepared slides thinking that I would get to that tail end of that section, but I didn't. And so we're going to go through the slides from last week first, because these pertain, it's kind of interesting, Geshe Loden focuses on these last few verses as opposed to our chart, which focused on the beginning section and the four qualities presented there. So anyway, we'll go through this and then we'll go through the verse and we'll see a little bit better kind of what's going on there. I will read the verse. I don't have it on the screen at the moment. It says, because wisdom, exalted wisdom, and liberation are indivisible from luminosity, radiance, and purity, they resemble the indivisibility of light, rays, and the disk of the sun. So this is the idea that's being set out. First, what it's being compared to, these various qualities, is set out by Geshe Loden here. So when you have the sun, the light of the sun, and the actual rays of the sun, we see that those are inseparable. They're all, again, part and parcel of what we mean by the sun. If any one of them is missing, you don't have the sun present, right? You don't have the other ones present. None ever exists without the others. Similarly, there are three factors at the point of attaining enlightenment that are said to be inseparable. The first is wisdom. In our verse, it's actually how it's set out in verse 94. Wisdom refers to the wisdom directly perceiving the ultimate. In other words, that aspect of a Buddha's mind that is knowing ultimate truth at all times, kind of in a meditative equipoise of understanding the emptiness of all phenomena. It is said to be clear, Geshe Loden says, because it makes reality or suchness, emptiness, very clear. And in this way, it is like the clear light of the sun. Okay? So there's nothing that's kind of it's the clarity of the light of the sun that is coming forward. There's nothing that is darkening it in any way. It has complete clarity. The second is called pristine awareness. In ours, it's called exalted wisdom. But this refers to the simultaneous realization of all manner of conventional truths. Again, you have those two wisdom minds together. You have the complete knowledge of all ultimate truths, the emptiness of all phenomena, and then you have the complete knowledge of all the phenomena that possess those emptinesses. So you would have complete knowledge of all of things that exist in our physical world, all of the things that have been, cultivated in the minds of beings, everything that has ever existed. You have complete awareness of through this omniscience that's attained at Buddhahood. And these two arise simultaneously, as it says there. Continuing, he says, it is said to be illuminating because it illuminates the various aspects of all objects of knowledge, just like the illuminating rays of the sun. If it weren't for the rays of the sun, we couldn't see all the various things that are around us, right? So this illuminates all these various categories of things that are to be known, which are all conventional truths, again, as opposed to the ultimate truths, the emptiness of those phenomena. The third, that is together inseparably or indivisibly with those other two, is release. By the release, it's meaning kind of abandonment, the end of all of the obscurations, the purification aspect. He says this refers to the final path of release from the obstructions to omniscience. When you get to the end of the path, there's a final wisdom that you cultivate to remove the subtlest obscurations to omniscience, and then you fall into a path of release where you'll never degenerate from that. You will be in the state of Buddhahood for perpetuity. He says, which that is the attainment of Buddhahood. That's what happens at the tail end of the path for the Bodhisattva. He continues saying, it is said to be pure because it is totally and finally free from the last vestige of the two obstructions. In this way, it is like the sun being freed from obscuring clouds or anything else that gets in the way of it. So we've seen that we have kind of the clearness of the sun, the illumination of the rays of the sun, and then these kind of unobstructed freedom to the sun to be able to shine. So these three, wisdom, again, knowing ultimate truth, pristine awareness, knowing conventional truth, and path of release, which is the final abandonment, are respectively clear, illuminating, and pure, and those three are inseparable. At the level of Buddhahood, one does not exist without the other. Okay, that's the whole point of this entire presentation, is the indivisibility of these qualities, that they coexist in the same moment of time throughout eternity, again, once one attains Buddhahood. Within the sphere of the ultimate, there is no difference in entity between these three. We can kind of say that they are the same entity, but we can again isolate them out mentally as having different aspects. A Buddha's wisdom perceiving the ultimate, her wisdom knowing all conventionalities, and her final path of release are inseparably one, as are the sun, its light, and the rays. Okay. In contrast to all other beings, he says, including even 10th ground bodhisattvas, again, that's the tail end of the path just before you become a Buddha's wisdom perceiving the ultimate truth simultaneously perceives conventional truths. Her wisdom perceiving conventional truth simultaneously perceives ultimate truth. So it says, in contrast to all other beings, that's because, again, just to remind you all, for all of those beings who are on the learning path, they have not yet become Buddhas. I'm specifically talking here about bodhisattvas. They will go into meditative equipoise. Their first initial insight into emptiness happens on the path of seeing, and they will realize emptiness directly, and that will be the only thing they know at that time is ultimate truth. Conventionalities don't appear to that mind. But then when they come out of their meditation, then conventionalities once more appear, but of course with a different understanding. Oh, you have been? Oh, okay. It's still on here. I don't know what's happening on my screen. Venerable Handrick needs to check something. Something happened here. We'll see what happens. And then it's there? Okay. Okay. So again, for that bodhisattva, when they come out of meditative equipoise, then conventionalities appear, and ultimate truth is no longer appearing to their mind because they're no longer in meditative equipoise. That's the schema for the bodhisattvas all the way through the 10th ground. They go into their final meditative equipoise on emptiness, and then they remove the last obscurations, and they fully bloom into the mind of a Buddha that knows both truths simultaneously, and that has the complete abandonment then of all the obstructions. So that's what we're, kind of referring to here in this kind of understanding that a Buddha's wisdom, his, hers, whoever's, their wisdom is perceiving both of these truths simultaneously. Again, in contrast to all other beings, a Buddha's view of conventional and ultimate truths during meditative equipoise and post-meditation are not any different, unlike those beings who I just described, again, who are on the learning path. For liberation to be an ultimate liberation, 4 characteristics must be present. Okay, this is verse 95. Let's hold off on this. Okay, let's go back to our text. Okay, so let's go through the part pertaining to verse 94 that we just had Geshe Loden's wonderful commentary on. Again, I already read the verse. Wisdom, in this context, once more, refers to the ultimate wisdom, directly realizing phenomena as they actually are. In other words, in terms of their emptiness, the ultimate truths. Exalted wisdom refers to the ultimate exalted wisdom, the final exalted wisdom that directly realizes phenomena as many as they are. Again, that's the conventionalities, the vast number of things that exist. Those two together constitute the insight or realizations of a Buddha. That's the sum total of their minds, is knowing all phenomena in that way. Liberation refers to the permanent abandonment of all defilement. Again, permanent both in the fact it's not changing, but permanent also in terms of it being eternal. From that point on, there's no alteration in it. You continue to have that, and you work tirelessly for the benefit of all beings, but your mind is fully purified. So these three, respectively, illuminate reality, radiate out to every existing conventional phenomenon, and are purified of all, oops, gotta get it to the next slide, all defilement. Again, there were different words used here instead of the referring to the kind of the clarity or whatever in the first one. The word illuminate was used, luminosity, radiate and radiance, again, instead of illuminate, and then the kind of purified, which again, Geshe Loden, I can't remember what he had for that, but just know that they were talking about these three aspects of the light of the sun, the rays of the sun, and the actual disk of the sun itself that is pure and clear in terms of no longer being obscured by clouds and what have you. So again, because these three are not different entities, they are in that manner of all three being there coexisting together. All right. So let's carry on then with a little bit of commentary that's here. We have the general correspondence of the analogy. He just again cites some passages from a Sangha's commentary because this is the commentary by Gyaltsab that is commenting on that. So I don't need to repeat that. The specific explanation says, this begins within the continuum of a Buddha, ... So within the continuum of a perfect Buddha, meditative equipoise and post-meditation are not separate. In other words, you just continue to abide in a clear state regardless of what's going on. That which perceives phenomena exactly as they are, their ultimate truth, also perceives phenomena as many as they are. That's conventional truth. So again, those two levels of insight or realization are coexisting in the mind of the Buddha. And that which perceives phenomena as many as they are also, I should say, also perceives phenomena exactly as they are. So again, the knower, the wisdom of a Buddha is knowing both truths simultaneously. And it says these three are of a nature inseparable from the Dharma Dhatu, the sphere of emptiness, and are likened to the three characteristics of the disk of the sun, which cannot be divided into separate entities. Again, we can see them as the same entity in one way, but different aspects of that entity. This describes how the three characteristics, wisdom and so forth, which illustrate nirvana inseparable from the four qualities, are likened to the sun. So again, it brings back in the four qualities that were at the beginning of this, back in verse 85, saying that this is nirvana that is inseparable from those, how they're likened to the sun and so on, is through these three being inseparable, indivisible. Then we get into the next section where it talks about the meaning of the assertion that those on the fundamental vehicle path, the hearer and solitary realizer practitioners, do not possess the ultimate vehicle and the ultimate nirvana. They do possess a nirvana, and they have practiced a vehicle, their fundamental vehicle, but they have not attained the final result. So in verse 95, Maitreya says, hence, without attaining Buddhahood, there is no attainment of non-abiding nirvana. Just as the sun cannot be observed set apart from its light and rays. In other words, you have to have the full development of the mind. You have to have all three aspects brought to their culmination. Remember, last week we also talked about this analogy of a painter or several painters that are being asked to produce a portrait of the king. And because they have different parts of the king's body that they specialize in, such as the hands or the face or whatever, they'll need different painters to paint each of these parts. And if something's missing, you can't have the full portrait. Same analogy is being used here. You can't get to this non-abiding nirvana, this complete state where you are free not only from samsara, which the fundamental vehicle practitioners will accomplish, but you're also free from the peace of nirvana, the solitary peace of nirvana. You won't abide in that state because you want to stay involved in the world through the force of your compassion for beings. So again, this is what we're talking about in terms of these fundamental vehicle practitioners not having attained that full realization, okay? So it says there, excellent qualities, complete in every aspect, innumerable, inconceivable, and purified of all defilement. Those four things should sound familiar. We just went through those four, right? All aspects that are innumerable, that's again referring to the knowledge of conventional truths. Inconceivable is the knowledge, complete wisdom of ultimate truth. And purified of all defilement is the abandonment side of it, that all of those four, again, three, if you condense them, are gathered together inseparably within the ultimate Dharmakaya, the final state of realization of a Buddha. Therefore, without the attainment of complete Buddhahood, there can be no attainment of ultimate nirvana. For example, if the light and the rays of the sun were taken away, the disk of the sun would not be seen. You have to have all three to get the fully qualified result. Because of the above, the assertion that hearers and solitary realizers do not attain or recognize nirvana is erroneous and does not understand what this section is trying to establish when it explains the indivisibility of the qualities. In other words, we're not saying that these folks who accomplish the state of foe destroyer don't have a nirvana. They just don't have the final nirvana. And that's something we went through previously as well. That there's a one final vehicle in regard to this presentation. Everyone eventually goes through the Mahayana path and achieves Buddhahood. So let's see. There's some parts of this that I'm going to skip. I'm going to go through the remainder of this on the text, and then we'll go on to back to Geshe Loden just to see what he talked about in regard to this. So this is, again, some additional commentary. It says, because of this, every quality of the Tathagata as a potential is a reality existing indivisibly within the basic element, pure in nature, present since beginningless time, and in possession of virtuous Dharma. Again, what this is emphasizing, this is a really important sentence. I highlighted this in my version, this sentence, because it's essentially saying that because of what we were presented here, that all of this can come to pass through the practice of the path, through the development of the wisdom realizing emptiness, the cultivation of all these various other qualities that are part of the other perfections. Remember, that was part of this painter analogy, was that we have to also develop the other 5 perfections in addition to the 6th, the exalted wisdom knowing emptiness. All of those fill out this entire process so that we eventually, through the force of having this potential, can actualize that. We go back to that sentence. It's essentially saying that all of that is there in potentialized manner. Not that it's actually there already. It's there in the manner of a potential. But that's what we've been referring to throughout this course, is this is Buddha potential. It's not that you are already a Buddha and you just don't know it. It's that you have the potential to become a Buddha through these 2 aspects of it. The developmental lineage that accumulates all these various qualities, and then of course the naturally abiding lineage, which is the emptiness of the mind, and through knowing that is how you actually are free from all of the faults. So again, this is what that's essentially saying, is that this is a reality existing indivisibly within the basic element, the Buddha nature, that is pure in its most fundamental way. This is the whole purpose of these 10 presentations, again, to say that the mind is clear light. It is fundamentally pure. And that's been there since beginningless time. We've always had this. And it's in possession of virtuous dharmas as potentials. This is what we can accomplish. If this passage meant that every quality already existed indivisibly within the basic element from the very beginning, it would contradict the following passage, which explains, without the Tathagata attainment of seeing with the unobstructed exalted wisdom, there can be no attainment of the nirvana that has abandoned all obscuration. So again, it requires additional work. We have that potential. We have to actualize it primarily, again, through seeing with this unobstructed exalted wisdom the truth of reality. Coming to that full culmination of the complete awareness of ultimate truth and conventional truth. Then we can attain the nirvana of the Buddhas. So I'm going to skip this last little bit. We're going to go to the summary in a moment when we come back. Let's go ahead and just go through what Geshe Loden presented, just so you can see his presentation in regard to that verse 95. So for liberation to be an ultimate liberation, or ultimate nirvana, 4 characteristics must be present. Such a liberation must have all qualities, which we called again all aspects, countless qualities, the innumerable. Remember, both of those can be combined into the vast, and inconceivable qualities, which we were calling the inconceivable, which is referring to the wisdom that is knowing the profound, the awareness of the complete emptiness of all phenomena. And then 4, the aspect of abandonment, which is purity from all stains, which we were calling being without defilement in our presentation, including the obstructions to omniscience. Right? So all the stains means not just the stains that those on the fundamental vehicle path remove, which are the afflictive obstructions, but also the obstructions to omniscience that the bodhisattvas remove on the pure grounds. Okay? We've talked about a lot of these things before, so I won't explain them again tonight. Therefore, he says, an ultimate liberation is not attained without attaining perfect Buddhahood, which has all four of these characteristics, just as the sun is not seen without its light and rays. The liberation attained by hearers and solitary realizers is not an ultimate liberation because it does not have any of the above four characteristics. It doesn't even possess the full purity, right? Because it's only pure of the afflictive obstructions, not the knowledge obstructions, those to omniscience. Okay, so this is the summary that Geshe Loden put together, and then we'll go to the summary of the 10 presentations. We finally come to the end of these 10. The 10 presentations that we have examined explain explicitly the nature of the purity of Buddha potential. Again, this clear light aspect. They also refer in a general way to the adventitious stains obscuring the pure nature of the Buddha potential. These are the two facts, again, I mentioned earlier, that we have this natural purity, which is the clear light nature of the mind, and then we have the adventitious stains that can be removed, that are obscuring that potential for the moment, but are not there in any sort of inherent way. Again, these go together. They're kind of teaching, in a sense, ultimate and conventional reality. The ultimate nature of the mind and the conventional nature of the mind not being together with those stains. Because the obscurations do not penetrate the nature of mind, there is the benefit of knowing that they can be separated from the mind. By analogy, pollution does not penetrate the nature of water, right? If I put dirt into water, the water still has its pure essence. It just needs to be, the dirt needs to be filtered out of it, and then it can return to that natural purity. Nor does tarnish penetrate the nature of gold, right? If you have some gold objects that have gotten some tarnish wear on them, you can remove it through polishing the gold and kind of removing that tarnish. Nor clouds the nature of space. And space being unobstructed contact. If there's this space that is, for the time being, kind of the realm of the clouds can then be removed. They don't abide naturally within that space. We can therefore assert that water is free from pollution, gold is free from tarnish, and space is free from clouds. Okay? All right, so we'll go on to those other slides once we get to the next section. Let's go back to our text and conclude this with the summary that Gyaltsuk Je has in his text. Again, verse 96ab is just a summary verse. It says the Tathagata essence is set out by way of these 10 presentations. So again, we had an introduction to it in a sense, but this is the conclusion to say, this is what's setting out the Buddha nature, the fundamental potential we all possess. The above presentation of the Tathagata essence in the way it has been set out, with its descriptions of its nature and so forth, I should say so, not do forth, has been in 10 parts. And we saw nature, cause, result, all of these various things. Remember, manifestation, various aspects through the 10 presentations. They've, concentrated on explaining the basic element in terms of its natural purity, while its adventitious defilement has been explained incidentally, similar to what Geshe Loden was saying, right? The next section is the reverse of that. We're going to mainly focus on, in the 9 similes, the adventitious impurities, the stains that can be removed because of that adventitiousness, because they're not in the nature of mind. It will be indirectly teaching the fact that the mind is free of any inherent nature, that it has that clear light nature. And it says, while it is acceptable to explain this verse as the link to the next section, I think it is not wrong to treat it as a summary of this section. So we go on then to the next page. We're up to page 170 in terms of the commentary. And we start with a little verse that acts as a sort of introduction to the 9 similes. By the way, Geshe Loden calls them examples. You'll see, essentially you can call them analogies too. I don't know all the difference in fine, print between these various terms, but we're going to be using different things as an example or an illustration to explain various aspects of Buddha nature and what obscures that Buddha nature and how it is adventitious and can be removed. So in the second half of verse 96, we get these two lines. At present, the basic element, the Buddha nature, dwells within a shell of afflictions and is to be known by way of examples or similes. So we can come to understand kind of how our Buddha nature is abiding there, even though there are these temporary adventitious defilements. So Gyaltsabje's commentary on this verse says, the minds of sentient beings may be pure by nature, but nonetheless, they dwell within the sheaths of afflictions. That these afflictions are adventitious defilements and do not engage with the nature of the mind can be understood by way of 9 examples. By engage, they mean they're not in the actual nature. And we once more have to say that our minds have defilement in them, right? There's dirt in the water, but it doesn't actually pollute the essence of the water. The water still has that fundamental clarity. In the same way, our mind still has that fundamental purity. So it says, this verse can also be understood as a synopsis of this section, similar to the first 2 lines of 96 that we just saw as a synopsis of the 10 presentations. These 9 similes are given on the basis of the sheaths of affliction dwelling without connection, in the sense of not penetrating the nature of mind since beginningless time. And also on the basis of this pure by nature reality dwelling connectedly, in the sense of penetrating the nature of mind since beginningless time. So it's kind of speaking to both facts again, right? Saying that it's within the understanding that these afflictions are kind of not penetrating the actual nature of mind. They abide in the mind, but they don't, pollute the mind at its deepest level. They're only there adventitiously. And on the basis, secondly, that the nature of the mind, its pure reality, is in the nature of it. This is penetrating the nature of it, meaning the emptiness of the mind is always there and always has been there. It's kind of interesting. When we get into these similes, we're going to see that the primary thing that is being referred to as the object that's sort of being obscured is the emptiness of the mind, is that naturally abiding lineage. But if you recall, when we go back to, and I'll put this on the screen now, you go back to something we looked at many, many classes ago, right? Which was this little chart that had to do with the 7 vajra points, right? We went through the first 3. This was the resultant state that each of us can attain, become this ultimate Buddha jewel, Dharma jewel, Sangha jewel. I won't go into all the other details on that. But then when we get to the 4th one, which is what we've been studying here, we see that, again, this is the substantial cause that will bring about your achievement, the basis for one to achieve the desired goal of the 3 jewels in your own continuum. And that is what's being referred to in this text frequently as the basic element for Buddha nature, Buddha potential, different ways that we refer to that. And you'll see that the ultimate, the final, the most dependable aspect of that is the emptiness of sentient beings' minds, which possess defilements and stains, right? So this is what we're talking about. We're blind to that reality. We're blind to the fact that we have this natural purity that has existed since beginningless time. And then, of course, the more conventional one, the one that we have to work with in order to also produce the causes for the purification of those defilements, is the developmental lineage, which is in that column described as the power or energy in the minds of sentient beings, which has the ability to develop transcendental knowledge, right? So we have these 2 things that are abiding together. The ultimate nature of the mind, its emptiness of inherent existence, its fundamental purity, together with the mind that currently is defiled, but can be free of that defilement by developing it. So as we get into this section in particular around this topic of the 9 similes, we're going to see that the main way that we are initially referring to what is obscured is that natural potential, with the understanding that by utilizing our developmental potential, we can accomplish both purities. The natural purity that is already there, that we don't have to accomplish, it already exists, and the purity of the adventitious defilements. Again, those 2 being the nature truth body. So the goal, in a sense, through all of this is to accomplish the nature truth body, which sounds kind of strange because it's technically not even a result. It's a, permanent phenomenon. It's not, it doesn't have any, it has causes and conditions that accompany it that kind of help to achieve that state, but it's in itself is not a caused phenomena per se. So anyway, this is the idea behind what we're looking at here. I just wanted to do a little preview of that to get us sort of on that page of understanding how this topic is being approached in regard to this 9 similes, which is again the second main portion of this text. Okay, so there's a bit of an introduction to all of this. Let me go back up one screen. Okay, there at the bottom of page 170, it says enumerating 18 similes, and you may say, well, I thought there were 9. There are 9 that each have a pair. The pair is that which is obscured and that which obscures. In other words, that which keeps what is obscured from being revealed, from being known. And so these are going to be corresponding to, first, the affliction, which obscures, would be the second one I mentioned. Again, that would be what's presented here first, is something that is kind of obscuring that reality. And then we have the phenomena of purity, which is that which is being obscured to us currently. So this is being introduced here. So that comes to 18 in total. There are 9 similes for phenomena of affliction, that which obscures, and 9 for phenomena of purity, that which is obscured. Why 9 in each case? The number of similes for the obscuring afflictions is settled at 9 because the actual number of obscurations is ascertained as 9. The first 4 of the 9 are the seeds of the 3 poisons. That's numbers 1 through 3. Everybody knows the 3 poisons of attachment, anger, and ignorance. These 3 are the main culprits of why we're in samsara, ignorance being the deepest root, but nonetheless, attachment and anger being the 2 main ways that we manifest around the phenomena that we interact with. Plus, number 4 in this group is the 3 poisons being forcefully manifested, and that's counted as 1. That's because they bring about negative behavior and aspects, regardless of how they, manifest. Nonetheless, they are separated in terms of them being dormant. So we have the 3 poisons dormant as 1 through 3, and then all 3 of them together manifesting as the 4th one. All right. Then it says, alternatively, they are all manifest afflictions and are divided by affliction into causes for the higher realms, the form and formless realms, and for the desire realm. All the commentaries I looked at didn't explain that so well, and I'm just putting forward one possibility. We could say that the first 3 are the main ones, and they would be for the desire realm, but then you would have the way in which they could be manifested, perhaps, again, referring to the higher realms. And so we would just say that they're the causes for the higher realms. But then again, they're all manifested. So you could have those that manifest in the desire realm, which would be the first 3, and then those that manifest in whatever they are in the higher realms. It is kind of interesting because they do say, when you study these various realms, that there is no anger manifesting in the form and formless realms. You don't have the causes created for that. You've separated from that to some degree. The form and formless realms are realms you go into through the force of developing deep concentration, where you've done that kind of separation for the time being from those states that are very coarse. Okay, so anyway, that's just an aside. Don't worry too much about that information. We're mainly going to use the presentation that was just given first, which is the first 3 are dormant, the 3 root poisons in a dormant state. And the 4th one is when those become manifest, when they actually come to the forefront. And that's counted as number 4. The other obscurations, Gyaltsab says, the ground of the imprints of ignorance, this means the knowledge obscurations, the imprints of our ignorance that give rise to dualistic appearance and become the obstacle for attaining Buddhahood. This is going to be primarily in relation to the arhats who have attained freedom from the afflictive obscurations, but they don't have freedom from that level of obscuration. Then the path of seeing abandonments, the path of meditation abandonments, these are going to be specifically presented in regard to the fundamental vehicle, the Hinayana path. And there'll be more about that coming up later. And then obscurations found on the impure levels of the Bodhisattva path and then obscurations that are found on the pure levels, the last three grounds, the 8th, 9th, and 10th grounds of the Mahayana path. So essentially, those are the remaining ones. So we have 9 in total. The first 4 that I went through. Number 5 is the ground of the imprints of ignorance. Number 6, path of seeing. Number 7, path of meditation. Number 8, the impure levels. And then number 9, the pure levels. All right. The number of similes illustrating the phenomena of purity, that which is obscured, is settled at 9. Why? Because the number of phenomena of purity is also ascertained as 9. These 9 can be condensed as the 3 aspects that were in the nature of the Buddha potential. Remember that first presentation way back when? We saw that there were 3 main aspects to it: the Dharmakaya, suchness, and lineage. Dharmakaya, if we go back to that verse was verse 27. I think I'm going to have to go back to it in regard to the text. Let me pull that up, and then I can, what I'm going to do, I'm not going to go back in the commentary, otherwise it'll take forever to get there. What I'm going to do is go back in terms of these verses. Again, you have a copy of this as well. This is just the verses without the commentary. This is when we first got into this explanation of the basic element, the Buddha lineage. And there were these 2 introductory verses, and then we went into the 10 presentations. Verse 27 says, because the activities of the Dharmakaya, the first sort of point, those activities are pervasive. In other words, the Dharmakaya, the wisdom of a Buddha, naturally penetrates the minds of all beings. Secondly, because suchness is undifferentiable, meaning the emptiness of our minds and the emptiness of the Buddha's minds are indifferentiable. It's the same suchness, same emptiness. And third, because sentient beings have the lineage, they have the ability to develop their minds in this way through possessing naturally abiding lineage, emptiness of their own minds. All sentient beings always have the Buddha essence. They always have that potential, and every one of them has this potential. So this was, again, in the first presentation, we saw these 3 aspects. We go down to that first presentation. We saw there was that analogy of the jewel, space, and water, blah, 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 blah. Again, I don't need to go into all of that in detail. But essentially, these 3 that, again, are mentioned in this paragraph here, the Dharmakaya, the suchness, and the lineage, these are kind of the nature of the Buddha lineage that we are discussing again as that which is obscured. We're not, sentient beings don't know that they have this naturally abiding lineage, that they have the ability to develop their minds because the minds are empty and the defilements don't penetrate the mind. So the first, Dharmakaya, which again, and here is mainly the truth body of realization, the wisdom truth body, it's divided into first, the Dharma of realization, and secondly, the Dharma of teaching. The second of which is further divided into teachings that express ultimate truth and teachings that express conventional truth. So remember that the Dharma of realization and the Dharma of teaching, these are the 2 main divisions of the Dharma jewel, right? Because we have the ability to gain realizations of the Dharma, but teachings are required in order for us to accomplish that. So we have the scripture and we have the realizations. The scripture itself can be divided, as it says here, into the scriptures that teach the emptiness of phenomena, and then the scriptures that teach conventional truths, conventional phenomena, such as karma and rebirth and all these other topics, right? Suchness, so that was okay. So you have 3 there in regard to Dharmakaya, because you have realization, and then you have 2 subdivisions of the scripture. Number 4 is suchness. Suchness itself has no divisions. It's kind of putting it forward in line with suchness being indifferentiable, right? Because there's no differentiating suchness of this from suchness of that. The emptiness of a table versus the emptiness of a person are the same emptiness. The basis is different. Therefore, we can delineate them as being different, but they're, in terms of the taste of emptiness of each of them, it's exactly the same. Okay, so then the third of these 3 main ones, which we're getting now into the 5th through the 9th of the similes, lineage. It can be divided in terms of its nature and of its ability, meaning the naturally abiding lineage and the developmental lineage. The first is divided into the naturally abiding lineage, And the lineage that arises from proper appropriation. Actually, I have to go back and erase that. Ability, I think, here is talking about the ability to actually accomplish the things that a Buddha would then need to be able to be a benefit to others. So I'm sorry, go back and erase what I said. In terms of its nature means in terms of whether it is the natural abiding lineage or the developmental lineage. So those are numbers 5 and 6 respectively, as it says here. The first is divided into the naturally abiding lineage and the lineage that arises from proper appropriation. It's kind of a mouthful. It's the developmental lineage. By properly appropriating the teachings of the Buddha, you can develop the mind all the way to enlightenment. That's the changing aspect of the mind, whereas the naturally abiding lineage is the unchanging emptiness of that mind. The second, its ability, can be divided into the first kind of lineage, having the potential to transform into the Dharmakaya, and the second kind, meaning the developmental lineage or lineage that arises from proper appropriation, as they call it, having the potential to transform into the 2 types of form body. Remember, we talked about how there are 2 form bodies. There are 2 main categories of form bodies, which are physical manifestations of the Buddha, the Sambhogakaya and the Nirmanakaya. So this makes 9 phenomena of purity. Let me actually pull up that chart. Again, that's here. Let me go back to one slide. Remember this chart that is this nice colored chart that shows these 4 bodies of a Buddha? Again, we have different presentations that might say 3 bodies of a Buddha, or sometimes even 2 bodies of a Buddha, the Dharmakaya, truth body, and the Rupakaya, the form bodies. But essentially, if we start from the left here, and we see that again, within the developmental lineage, there is first the 2 form bodies, emanation body, Nirmanakaya, which is the way that Buddhas emanate for the benefit of all beings. And then the enjoyment body, which is a body they have more specifically for Arya Bodhisattvas, those Bodhisattvas who've achieved a direct realization of emptiness, who are kind of going to be developing their minds to remove the rest of the obscurations. That's the Sambhogakaya. These are the 2 ways that Buddhas interact with sentient beings. From the side of the truth body, it has 2 divisions as well. One of them is part of our developmental lineage, the developmental aspect, which is our wisdom truth body. That's the Jnana Dharmakaya. That is the development of our wisdom to the degree that we were talking about, where you have the full knowledge of everything that exists conventionally, as well as the emptiness of all those phenomena. And it's imbued, of course, with perfect compassion and love for all beings, so that you then emanate these 2 bodies from the wisdom truth body. On the permanent side, on this side, that what arises from your naturally abiding lineage is once more the nature truth body. I mentioned this earlier. The nature truth body consists of 2 aspects: the natural purity of the mind, which is our Buddha lineage, the naturally abiding lineage, but it moreover has the freedom from the adventitious stains. So again, our naturally abiding lineage, in a sense, transforms into the nature truth body once we've removed all the defilements. And our developmental lineage becomes the wisdom truth body of a Buddha, and then the 2 physical emanations, emanation and enjoyment bodies, these 2 ways that Buddhas have formed in order to benefit sentient beings. So if we go back to our text again, what it was saying here is that when we get to the ability, that can be divided into the first kind of lineage, our naturally abiding lineage, transforming into the Dharmakaya, meaning the nature truth body. And the second kind, transforming into the 2 types of form body. So you notice that it left off the wisdom truth body. Where is that? If this transforms into these 2 bodies and this transforms into that body, where is the wisdom truth body? I guess it's kind of implicit within that, because you can't have the nature truth body without the wisdom truth body, right? Just like you can't have the emptiness of a cup without the cup. So these 2 are together. The fully developed mind of a Buddha, together with its emptiness and its complete freedom from all obstructions, these are abiding in an indivisible way, as we saw when we looked at that topic just a short while ago. Okay, so that's the 9 of that which is obscured, and the 9 of that which obscures. Now, this is a lot. This introduction, don't worry so much about getting all the details, because we're going to go into every one of these in much more detail. This is an introduction. This is giving us an idea. What I might point out is while we're at it, let me go back to those charts. You do have charts pertaining to these. And again, initially, we're not going to be going into all the detail on this chart. We're going to primarily be looking at the individual simile, which is far to the left there, and then to some degree, what these two are corresponding to. Because you always in the simile have something which is obscured and something which is obscuring. We have to understand those. And then we'll go into more detail on it when we get into the individual verses and kind of understand who these are being kind of directed at. There is a sort of summary chart that is kind of nice to work with in a more general way, and that's chart number 4. And that's on the screen now. This is kind of the 9 similes all set out in a very concise way. So we see that we have first the simile of an actual Buddha. This is sometimes talked about as a Buddha statue, but it seems like it's an actual Buddha, the actual Tathagata, who is in a withered lotus. It sounds kind of strange, sounds unusual, but the obscuring is the lotus, in this case, this kind of discolored lotus that has begun rotting. And then what is obscured is the Buddha form, the actual form body of a Buddha. And then we'll see again that it has corresponding things that it refers to. Again, these are what we just looked at, though, briefly. The 3 dormant poisons, attachment, hatred, and ignorance. Then the forceful manifestation of those 3, that was the 4th. And then we have these ground of the latencies or imprints of ignorance, the objects of abandonment of the Hinayana path of seeing, Hinayana path of meditation, and then the impure grounds and the pure grounds. That's all exactly what we just looked at in terms of that which obscures, what the analogy is for that. And then we have the actual thing that is being obscured, which again was the Dharmakaya for the first 3, suchness for number 4, and then the lineage for the remaining 5. Again, quite specific aspects of it. We'll go into that in more detail. Let's go into the introduction of these. Again, don't expect to get it all from just this run through, because it is important that we go through this, but nonetheless, this isn't the full presentation. So for the very first one, this dormant desire and a lotus are likened because when they first appear, they are causes of pleasure and later causes of disappointment, right? Because, when we get a beautiful flower, maybe you don't get lotuses every day, but if you get like some beautiful flower, it's very pleasing and you get quite attached to it in that beautiful form when it's reached its peak. But then it begins to wither and decay, right? That's what happens to flowers, right? This is why our desire is kind of like that. We get attracted to things thinking that they're going to remain in this pure, beautiful way that we experience them, but they actually change. There's impermanence. Now, there's a little insert thing here. It says, you might ask, isn't the desire illustrated by the lotus in a non-manifest dormant state? Yes, it is. It's saying it's dormant. It's not manifest. Why is the lotus compared with the pleasure of manifest desire? In other words, why do you use this thing that actually does induce desire, that is a more manifest way of desire being there? So it would make more sense for it to be compared to that as opposed to it being dormant. There is no fault here, as Gyaltsab says. It can also be compared with dormant desire, which when manifest will cause pleasure, right? So whether we talk about dormant desire or manifest desire, they have the same effect eventually. Once we come into contact with a beautiful object, then the dormant desire becomes manifest desire. And it says, and the meaning can also be understood by just the general correspondence, right? Because they're in the same category. They're both desire. All right, so then the second analogy or simile, anger and bees are similar in that they prevent contact with happiness, right? It's kind of the idea of a swarm of bees that are kind of very painful if you would happen to be stung by those bees, right? And this is what anger sort of feels like and seems like. Third, ignorance. This is again dormant ignorance, as it was dormant anger in the previous one. And the husks of grain are similar in that they veil sight of the essence. When you have a husk around a particular grain, such as the kernel of wheat or the rice that is within that, you can't see the grain. It's obscured because the husk gets in the way. That's what ignorance does. It obscures us to the nature of things. Those are the first 3 that are dormant. And then it says the fourth, the powers of these 3 to produce their own self-perpetuating continuums are quite different. And so they are explained separately, right? When they actually do manifest, they do have a different power. That's when we actually get in trouble. And again, all three of them cause us to engage in negative behavior frequently. So we lump them all together when they are in a manifest state. That's the first four of these similes. Number five, or well, first we're going to talk about these three together. The arousing of these three is matched with filth in that fourth analogy because they are both repulsive. Their forceful manifestation initiates wrong behavior, and because such behavior is degrading, it is repulsive like excrement. Because there is no difference in their abilities to produce wrong behavior, these three are presented as a single category of obscuration. The analogy that's used there, by the way, is this filth that is kind of obscuring a gold piece of gold, and that gold kind of remains untarnished even though it's in a pile of excrement. So anyway, let's go on then to the fifth one. The imprints of ignorance and the earth or the dirt are matched. Or ground, I think is a better way to talk about it, are matched because just as the earth or ground covers the treasures within it that are buried underneath it, ignorance covers the attainment of the self-arisen, attainment of the state of arising in the form of a Buddha. For those foe destroyers that have attained their result, they still haven't gotten to that place of arising in the form of a Buddha because they still have those imprints, still have those knowledge obstructions. The path of seeing abandonments, again, Hinayana path of seeing, correspond to fruit seed because as soon as a seedling grows within the fruit seed, the seed itself is destroyed, right? As soon as the seedling or sprout has come out, well, then the seed itself is gone. You no longer have the seed. In the same way, when you are on the path of seeing and you abandon all of the obstructions that are corresponding to it, they are gone because you have manifested this path of seeing. It says here, likewise, as soon as the path of seeing is born, the path of seeing abandonments are destroyed. The path of meditation abandonments are likened to old, worn out clothes. That's the obscuring factor because they no longer have any value, right? Because we begin to discard them and remove them one after another. The obscurations found on the impure levels are likened to a low caste pregnant woman, a woman who has a baby within, but it's not known the nature of this baby, that this baby is actually going to be a universal monarch, as it's called, a universal king. And that's because of the way they both hide what is to be known, what should be known. The obscurations that are found on the pure levels of the bodhisattva path are likened to the slight contamination of the clay mold because neither are thick and only cause slight obscuration. A clay mold around a gold Buddha statue is just a thin layer we have to remove in order to be able to see the gold within. That's because on the pure grounds, you've removed all the afflictive obscurations and you just have the knowledge obscurations to be free of. These are the similes of the obscuring phenomena. The similes of the obscured phenomena are as follows. The Dharmakaya is likened to a Buddha form because they're both incomparable to anything of this world. So an actual form of a Buddha is what's being obscured by the rotting lotus. Speech that teaches the ultimate truth is like honey that the bees are swarming over because it grants the single taste happiness of its experience. They say that all emptiness is one taste, so too all honey is sweet in taste, right? You don't have honey that's salty. Right? Honey always has a sweetness in its taste, the single taste experience. Speech that teaches the conventional truth, the third one, and the kernels of grain that are within the husk are similar because they are of great variety, right? We can talk about rice grains and barley grains and wheat grains and all the various things, all these variety of grains. That's like the conventional truths that can be delineated in a variety of ways. They're similar because of being of great variety and therefore wide-ranging. The fourth thing which is obscured is suchness, emptiness. It's like gold because in its nature, it cannot change for the worse, right? Gold will continue to be gold, even if it's in filth again, because it's not going to be damaged. It will maintain its gold nature, its purity. The suchness of the mind is similar. It's always there, regardless of beings in the hell realm or beings in the most sublime realms in samsara. The emptiness is the same. Fifth, I think we're up to fifth now. The naturally abiding lineage is like natural treasure because it exists undeveloped through effort. It's again under there beneath the ground, always. It's always existed undeveloped. We just have to find it. We just have to become aware of it, reveal it. The lineage arising from correct adoption, what we've been calling developmental lineage, is like a tree because it is developed through effort, or they would say again, this thing that comes again from the sprout, from the seed, that which kind of eventually becomes a tree. They often use in this, speaking of this, the mango tree. So you start off with the mango seed, and it's obscured again, and then it sort of gives rise to the fruit tree of a mango tree. The Dharmakaya is likened to a self-arisen precious treasure, or statue, precious statue, because it is not newly created by the labors of others, and because it is the basis of every perfected quality. Again, that's the naturally abiding, or the nature truth body that is we have the potential to achieve, which is kind of like, again, this perfect self-arisen statue that is there in terms of its naturally abiding lineage aspect, its natural purity, but then also when we attain the state of Buddhahood is there in the form of the adventitious purity. The enjoyment body is likened to a universal emperor or king because it enjoys the great kingdom of Dharma. I don't need to say much on that. I think, again, this is the enjoyment body that is only manifesting for Arya Bodhisattvas. The emanation body is like an image crafted from gold because it is an image of the Dharmakaya. And you can take that gold and make many things out of it, right? And the emanation bodies are manifold, the variety of ways that Buddhas can manifest for the benefit of others. So you can take that gold, the Dharmakaya, and kind of, it can be in various images. Okay. And we have this little paragraph here that's talking about desire in its dormant state. I'm just going to summarize this. Essentially, what it's talking about is when we get into this whole thing of, okay, we've got that which is obscured and that which is obscuring, and you kind of look at them and you kind of want to think, well, are they just perfectly matched one to one so that like, if you remove the dormant desire, then you immediately are manifesting the Dharmakaya? Well, no, I mean, this is all of them in total, in a sense. And you even have some overlapping stuff in regard to that which obscures, right? Because the things that are removed on the Hinayana path are also the same things that the Bodhisattvas remove on the impure path, right? Okay, so you have a lot of different overlapping. This is just to delineate the variety of things that are involved in this whole process. So it's not like just removing one of them will reveal perfectly the full developed um, obscured phenomenon. You know, all of these kind of act in tandem. So don't get too caught up into these things being matched together and thinking that there's some sort of ability within each of them to actualize the result. They are all part and parcel of actualizing the full result of Buddhahood. So that's the best way to summarize that. Yeah. So the presentation, let's just leave this go. That's again kind of the answer that he gave. Now we go into the individual explanations. This is still not yet kind of the real deep explanation of each of these. Instead, we're going to have a couple of verses, a total of 3 verses, that kind of spell out that which is obscured, that which is obscuring, and then how they kind of come together in an analogy or a simile. So this I'm not going to say a lot about. We can even go through Geshe Lodin's presentation of this, but it's essentially going to say pretty much the same thing. We have the 9 here of kind of how they are being put together. So we have first like a Buddha, an actual, again, form body of a Buddha in a decaying lotus, like honey among bees, the second one, grain within a husk, and gold amid filth. Those are the first 4, again, that are all about the afflictions of ordinary beings. The 5th is a treasure of jewels in the earth that is buried underneath the ground. The 6th is the seedling and so forth within a small fruit. So if we have like this mango, again, from the mango with the seed within it can eventually sprout and become a tree and so on. A statue of the conqueror in tattered robes. So you can have all these tattered robes or torn cloth that is all around the statue of a Buddha. So it's not revealed. Then number 8, a lord of humans, meaning a universal monarch, which is said to be this being that manifests at times to help beings in a very profound way and has many of the same marks of a Buddha, even though they are not a Buddha themselves. And that's in the womb of a lowly woman. Again, a woman who you wouldn't think looking at her that she's going to give birth to this amazing king, right? Because you're obscured to seeing that in the womb. And then ninth, a precious golden image, again, of a Buddha statue that is made of gold, that is in a clay mold. Similarly, the basic element of natural purity abides within sentient beings, obscured by the adventitious defilements. Once more, like I said at the very beginning, the natural purity, the element of our naturally abiding lineage, is what's really being obscured here, the emptiness of our own minds. And that's the main thing, even though we're looking at various other phenomena that are being correlated with that. But remember, that's what we're talking about. It's its most ultimate nature. It's the naturally abiding lineage. It's a developmental lineage that is more conventional nature that we have to work with. So what are these 9 illustrations? Again, I don't maybe need to repeat all this because it's essentially going through exactly what I just said. The very last sentence, it says, by nature, by presenting, let's go to where, a little bit above that, the 4th line from the bottom of that paragraph. Likewise, within sentient beings obscured by the adventitious defilement of afflictions, there exists this basic element of natural purity. By presenting these illustrations, such as a Buddha form in the lotus and so on, these verses are merely teaching that the basic element exists within the obscuration of adventitious defilement, right? That's the main point of these similes. And we have a short presentation of the obscured and the obscuring. So we have the defilements, what obscures, are compared to lotus, bees, husk, filth, earth, seed, tattered robes, a woman tormented by fierce suffering, and the earth constituent, meaning kind of, again, a clay mold, a mold made out of earth or dirt. Then the naturally pure, precious, basic element is compared to a Buddha, honey, a kernel, gold, treasure, a banyan tree. This one it uses banyan tree, but in some of the analogies I've read, it uses a mango tree. A precious statue, a supreme lord of the continents, world, universal monarch, what have you, and a precious image of a Buddha. So what are the defilements compared to? They're likened to all of those. And then to what is it compared? It's likened to the other 9, right? So I don't need to repeat all of those. Then we get into the actual individual explanation of each of these, which is going to take us all the way through, I don't know, verse 100 some, going to be way up there by the time we end all of this. Let me stop the presentation of those and just share with you what Geshe Loden says, which again is nothing earth-shaking, but nonetheless I think it's useful to hear his presentation of this. Recall that in one of them he talks about, in the very first one, he talks about it being a statue, and it's really not a statue in terms of our presentation. Though the nature of the mind of sentient beings is pure, it nonetheless exists within the enclosure of the delusions. However, these delusions, which are merely adventitious stains, do not permeate, or we saw in our text, penetrate the nature of the mind. This can be seen by examining the following 9 examples, because we look at all 9 examples, what it's obscuring or covering isn't in any way damaged. You know, that which is obscured always is able to kind of be separated and isolated apart, right? What then are the 9 examples? The first is the presence of a Buddha's form, complete with the major and minor marks enclosed within a decaying lotus flower. There he talks about it fine, but when you get to the first one in more detail, he actually talks about it as being a statue, but it's actually meant to be the actual form body of a Buddha. The second is the presence of honey amid a swarm of bees. The third is grain existing within its husk. The fourth is the presence of gold that is covered by filth. The fifth is the existence of a precious treasure under the ground. The sixth is the potential within the seed of a fruit to sprout into a tree. The seventh is a Buddha statue made from precious jewels, covered by tattered rags. The eighth is the presence of a baby who will become a great king within the womb of an ugly woman. The ninth is the presence of a golden Buddha statue encased in a clay mold. As illustrated by these examples, Buddha potential exists within the continuum of sentient beings, obscured by the stains of the 9 types of adventitious defilements. Again, a way of parsing up all the various things that obscure our minds, and we saw them when we went through the 3 dormant afflictions and so on, all of that. The natural Buddha potential, oh, this is the first one now. Okay, so we don't want to go to that yet. Let's go back to our text. Where are we at? 822. Let's at least start this first one. I was hoping to get a little further, but I'm always a little more optimistic than what I should be, perhaps. We see that essentially there are 4 main outlines. That's because we're going to be talking about 4 types of beings. The first ones correspond most directly to ordinary beings, which tend to be mostly obscured in regard to the 3 dormant poisons, as well as when they are manifest. The first 4 pertain to ordinary beings like ourselves who are not on the path yet, the Hinayana path or the Mahayana path, and we certainly aren't, approaching or attaining any sort of freedom from the afflictive obstructions like an arhat. The second one, establishing by illustration the adventitious nature of the imprints of ignorance, is referring to the arhats, those who have accomplished the fundamental vehicle path, the Hinayana path, who still are obscured with regard to the complete attainment of buddhahood, because they still have the imprints, the knowledge obstructions. 3 is referring to those on the Aryas that are on the Hinayana path that have not yet attained the state of arhatship. That's the adventitious nature of the path of seeing and the path of meditation abandonments. Then the 4th is the Arya Bodhisattvas, again, who have not yet attained Buddhahood. Here we have the illustration of the adventitious nature of the defilements that are found in the impure and the pure levels. Again, of the 10 grounds, the first 7 are impure, the 8th through 10th are pure. Okay, so we'll get to those and we'll be explaining all those as we go into the individual categories. The first one, whoops, not too far, is those first 4 defilements, dormant, desire, and so on. They're going to be divided into 2, the 3 poisons when they're dormant, which are the first through the 3rd, and then the 4th one is going to be presented as 1. So first, those 3 poisons when dormant, it has 3 individual divisions, which makes sense, right? Because there are 3 root poisons. These 3 poisons of, again, desire or attachment, anger, and ignorance. So let's look at the first one, dormant desire. Again, he cites a passage from a Sangha's text. The root text that we have for that is going to be set out first in giving that the actual simile, talking about the meaning of it, and then kind of how the purification is done by removing what defiles it, what is not allowing the naturally abiding lineage to be seen, to be manifest. So verse 100 says, when seeing that in a lotus of poor color, there dwells a Tathagata, radiant with 1,000 marks, a person with the undefiled divine eye, which is one of our clairvoyances that allows you to see through such aberrations, takes it out from the whorl of its lotus petals, kind of sees that it's there and removes it, right? So it can be seen. For example, inside the closed petals of a foul-smelling lotus of poor color is the form of a Tathagata, radiant with 1,000 features of enlightenment. A person with the undefiled divine eye notices it and takes it out of the covering of the lotus petals. Similarly, that's where we get to the meaning of it, what it is referring to, what is the simile representing. The Sugatas, the Buddhas, with their Buddha eye, see their own nature, even in those abiding in the hells of no respite. This idea that they see that every being is possessing of naturally abiding lineage, that they have an emptiness of their minds. It is the basis upon which they can become a Buddha. So the description there, it says, the Sugatas with their Buddha eye see directly their own reality, even in those beings in the hells of no respite. Again, those beings who, wherever you're at, you're together still with the emptiness of the mind. It's not in any way altered or changed, depending upon what realm you're in. And then kind of the purification aspect of it is the remainder of verse 101. Those without defilements abide until the end of time, freeing sentient beings from their defilements through their compassion. Remember, this first one is referring to the wisdom truth body of a Buddha that will abide in perpetuity, to know the minds of beings and free them from their defilements, not directly, but indirectly through teaching them the Dharma, right? Allowing them to see the emptiness of their own minds and to remove their own obscurations. So the commentary says, who can remove this obscuration? The Bhagawan Buddhas, who have abandoned forever all defilement and are therefore free of all obscuration, who possess great compassion, and who will remain until the end of time for the sake of sentient beings, will free ordinary beings from the veils of dormant desire. This could be presented as applying to all defilements. Remember that first aspect of Dharmakaya, when we looked at verse 27, it's referring to the wisdom body, the truth body of a Buddha that is knowing all phenomena, that is continually aiding beings, and we are all subject to the guiding influence of those beings. All right? Then there's an extensive explanation in verse 102. Just as a person endowed with the divine eye sees the Sugata within a foul lotus and breaks open its petals, right? It sees that form body of a Buddha and kind of reveals it. The subduer, seeing the essence of a perfect Buddha within living beings, obscured by a shell of attachment, hatred, and so forth, because you could include all the delusions in it, through compassion engages in overcoming these defilements. We're singling out dormant attachment here, but all of these are obscuring our Buddha nature. A person endowed with the divine eye sees the form of the Sugata within the closed petals of a foul lotus and breaks open the petals in order to release it. Similarly, seeing the essence of the perfect Buddha obscured by the coverings of desire and so forth, at the very nature of all sentient beings, the compassionate conqueror likewise destroys the obscurations. Again, the Buddha doesn't come in and do this for you, but the Buddha gives you all of what you need to be able to accomplish that. That ends the first brief presentation, very brief. Again, we're not getting into all the layers of meaning yet. That's still coming. But it gives us the analogy to work with, to kind of understand that this is about a Tathagata's form body that is being encased within this foul-smelling, putrid lotus. And this is, again, representing attachment because we first get attached to the lotus when it's beautiful, but that's the nature of it to eventually become impure. But the Buddha's body that is underneath there is pure and can be seen by a person with clairvoyance and be revealed. Similarly, the Buddhas can see our naturally abiding lineage and give us the teachings that will help us to reveal it, to be aware of it, to understand that we have that potential. And go through really quickly, and then we'll do our discussion. Geshe Loden's slides on this. There's just a few of them. The natural Buddha potential, again, the emptiness of the mind within the continuum of all sentient beings, when separated from all obscurations, transforms into a Buddha's nature body, right? That's the final result of that. The naturally abiding lineage becomes the nature body when it has that full purity of all the adventitious obscurations. The Buddha has seen that this potential exists, even in the case of beings in the lowest realms. There, in the manner of being enclosed by various impurities. Through his great compassion, the Buddha has shown the methods to remove these impurities. When his disciples practice these methods in accordance with his instructions, they will remove all the obscurations to the natural potential and will thus attain the nature body. The example speaks of a beautiful statue. Again, he says statue, but it's a form body of a Buddha, complete with all the major and minor marks, hidden within the closed petals of a withered, discolored lotus flower. When this body is perceived by a person who has the attainment of the clairvoyant divine eye, that person is able to remove the petals which obscure the form body of the Buddha so that it becomes completely and clearly manifest. Were we to become aware of a beautiful Buddha statue or Buddha body hidden amongst the petals of a lotus, we would remove the obscuring petals and reveal it fully, right? Similarly, the Buddha is aware of the Buddha nature within all living beings, specifically here, their natural potential. By removing the obscuring delusions of desire, hatred, and so on, the natural potential is fully revealed in the attainment of the Buddha's nature body through, again, developing the mind completely, removing all of the obscurations. So we'll continue next week with the second and go through the remaining ones as far as we can get with this initial sort of introduction. Let me show you what the discussion questions are for tonight that you can engage in if you would like to participate in that. And then we'll conclude with a dedication, and if there's any questions from that discussion when we return. We have this first question that has to do with the first part of the talk tonight, that last bit around the 10th presentation on indivisibility, kind of working with that analogy that was presented in verse 94 and the meaning of it in 95 and so on. Then regarding the 9 similes, kind of those few questions that are about it in a very general way. And then the question that was posed in our text, why are there 9 similes presented for the obscuring afflictions and for the phenomena of purity? Again, that delineation of why there are 9 in a very general way. And then the last question that's on the screen, if you have time for it, the first one, that of the lotus. It says, set out the illustration of the obscured and the obscuring phenomena, which is, again, have that from all of your, what we've gone through so far. And the brief meaning of the simile, meaning kind of what is it referring to? Just like we saw in that explanation, this is the Buddha's ability to then reveal to us through their seeing our natural purity that we have that we have this naturally abiding lineage that can be developed, all right? That's kind of the idea behind the discussion. I kind of gave you some of the answers for the last one there, but that's okay. Just make sure there's something in the chat, perhaps. Okay, no, those are all just about difficulties with the Zoom thing. All right, let's go ahead and do our discussion then. So again, we've got about 22 minutes or so. You can spend some time, about 5 minutes to the top of the hour, just before we end. I'll come back in and see where everybody's at and if there are any questions from the discussion. All right. Okay, so were there any things that came up from the discussion that you want to ask about or clarify or whatever?
Oh, I have
Okay,
a quick
Jayla had to leave. So again, we can't hear you, Amy. So if you have a question, if you can put it in the chat box and then I can read it out to everyone.
Let's see. In terms of the similes, how...
Is there anything here in the room from anyone? Okay. You aren't able to get that on, Lou? I think Amy was just talking and we didn't hear it, so I don't know. Amy, if you just say something really quick, we'll see if whether the speakers are working here.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Oh yeah, we can.
Oh,
good, we got you.
That's great.
Sorry to make you do all that typing, and then yeah, we can hear you.
Let's see if I can articulate this a little bit. So in terms of when Sheila and I were talking about the similes, we went back and looked at that chart, that table that you had created that showed the similes and talked about the observations. And the last column, I think, said something about like how to overcome each one. And then we both sort of thought, we didn't recall you talking about that during tonight's teaching. Is there something that you would like to share about that? Like for each obscuration, is there some kind of like, how should we think about overcoming each one?
Yeah, and I'm really like for everything that was on that chart, we'll put the chart up on there. We haven't really gone through all of this yet. This will be, again, that's why I just kind of introduced you to this chart so that you'd have an idea that it's out there. But with regard to the first one, for example, I mean, there's like this explanation that's on the far right-hand side, and then there's the people who are mainly being the possessors of those obscurations, not that they're exclusively the possessors of those, and so on. And then all this other in the middle here, that's kind of the meaning of that which is obscured and that which obscures. This is a lot more information that we haven't yet gotten to. Tonight was mostly the first 2 columns, at least in the initial presentation, and even just a little bit more information in regard to the obscured and that which obscures. So I think if I'm hearing your question correctly, it's just a matter of hanging in there. And as we get into more descriptions of all these various factors, um, trying to think, we don't have, I don't know that we have the whole outline thing with just the outlines. That does exist somewhere, I think. But if we look at this root verses, we see that there are a whole bunch of root verses. Whoops, no, that's back in the, let's go forward to about where we're at. We have this kind of more extensive explanation that we're in. We're going to be getting into kind of all of this individually, but then it kind of goes on. I'll just kind of go forward several pages, and we see that there are the individual, like right here on this page, we get into verse 131 and on, and beyond. It's got the individual explanations of the phenomena that are illustrated by the similes. It first goes into the types of obscurations of the basic element and goes into all of those. So we get kind of more detail on what all of these various things are. And then it goes into the types of obscured persons, again, the people who have primarily those obstructions. And then what was the other one? Yeah, the correspondence and the 9 similes of the basic element obscurations, the thing that is actually obscuring that Buddha nature. So you get kind of more and more detail, and it kind of keeps adding on to it. And the 9 similes go on for a while until we get to this section, verse 154, that talks about the consciousnesses that perceive the basic element. Again, so we've got a lot more information coming. So I will be filling you in more on those. That's why I'm trying to keep on the questions for the discussion, just to go into like a brief overview of these similes, because the meanings of all the various aspects are going to be fleshed out over time. I thought about teaching it differently, like maybe grabbing each of the sections pertaining to the first simile from each of them and kind of working with it that way. But it gets really confusing then. Kind of people are moving from one part of the text to another, and I don't know. There's some benefit to that. I have taught this as just a very brief course for some centers who have asked me to give like an introduction to this subject. And then I would present like maybe 3 of the similes, and I would go through the individual verses that pertain to each part of them, the meaning of that which is obscured and the meaning of that which obscures and so on, and give kind of the full presentation with regard to one of them, and then the full presentation with regard to a second, and then a third. And then that way they at least get a taste of what this text does. But it is kind of a strange format. They kind of introduce it and say, this is this and this is that, and then they go into more detail about what it all means. But so I don't know that I could say anything more tonight because it's all coming. But thank you for that question, Amy. Yeah.
Thank
So
you.
let's go ahead and conclude tonight then, since I don't think there are any other questions. Again, you do have those to work with to review things over the next week. And then when we return next week, we'll again carry on with the kind of little bit more elaborate, but yet still quite brief presentation of the 2nd through the 9th. And then we go into more detail in terms of the meanings of those. Although again, there is already some presentation of that, but let's go to the prayers and do our dedication prayers. So we begin with the one on the screen. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish but increase more and more. And then we dedicate for our teachers, all of those who are still with us through the force of reciting this prayer for His Holiness. May His Holiness Himself, as well as all these beings, have good health and long lives, and may they continue to have their holy wishes be fulfilled. So let's recite that verse first. The wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, to the incomparably kind Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech. May all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. And then with regard to Rinpoche, we want his incarnation to swiftly appear in this world again, so we can benefit from him in this world. So we'll recite these verses for him. Peerless teacher and assembly of the children of the victorious ones, Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, victorious Losang, father and sons, along with the lineage masters, all the objects of refuge of infinite lands, Please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now. Holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable Venerable Guru, to you I make request. While striving single-pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, and for mother living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. What a great loss! Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the ocean of the three jewels and the great waves of bodhicitta of the children of the victorious ones, may the smile of a reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples. Then we dedicate for any beings that we're holding in our hearts right now, those beings whose situation we know or that we've heard of, that we want them to be free from that suffering. We send this positive energy out to those beings, think that it becomes immediately the cause for them to have that suffering removed, and for them to find all the causes that will lead them on a path of full awakening. And may all beings experience these same results through what we have done here tonight. Okay, thank you all so much for joining online, as well as everyone here in the Gompa. So I will see you again next Thursday. All right, be well.